Excellencies, dear Mr. Gabriel, dear Mr. Kempe, ladies and gentlemen, herzlich willkommen bei der DZ Bank am Pariser Platz. A very warm welcome to all of you to DZ Bank at Paris Square in the heart of Berlin. It is a great honor for us to welcome you all here today on the occasion of the second Transatlantic Forum on Geoeconomics, to a location with a very special reference to America, designed by none other than Franco Gehry. Well, 75 years ago, this was a very different place. All around Paris Square, and also on this property, there are ruins and piles of rubble. The Brandenburg Gate marked the border between two global power blocks. And one power bloc, the Soviet Union, had imposed a total blockade on West Berlin. As you know, those were the days when the very special post-war German-American relationship was born. Because the US did not give up the city and its people. Instead, in June 1948, they established, together with the British, the famous Berlin airlift, Berliner Luftbrücke. Why do I start with this? Because exactly 75 years ago, today, on September 22nd, 1948, during the airlift, something amazing happened. The US Air Force started the so-called Operation Little Vittles. And Little Vittles was not primarily about saving lives. It was about saving souls, souls of children that were scared by war and poverty. It brought candies and chocolate bars collected by American soldiers and civilians, tied to little parachutes made of handkerchiefs, and then thrown out of planes just before reaching Berlin Tempelhof Airport. What was started by a compassionate American pilot called Gail Harvison became kind of a little mass movement, with a volunteer committee in Massachusetts, candy makers donating their products, American school kids sending in candies and handkerchiefs, and German kids sending back letters and artworks. In other words, Little Vittles was not primarily between government and institutions, it was between people. So maybe September 22nd, 1948 marked a tipping point, the tipping point at which the emerging German-American partnership grew into a friendship. And a strong and vital friendship is exactly what we need to face the tremendous challenges of our time. And these challenges are indeed tremendous. We are talking a lot about geostrategy again. We're witnessing a brutal war in Europe, China expanding into the Indo-Pacific, partial destabilization in Africa, and some parts of the Middle East that just cannot find peace. We're witnessing the rise and the destructive power of populism, even in established democracies, a challenge to which we're still looking for good answers. We're facing the enormous challenge of securing prosperity and enabling more people to participate in it, in a world with very different economic and demographic dynamics. And of course, the greatest challenge we all must tackle together, global climate change and the preservation of our biodiversity. In brief, the preservation of our planet and our children's future. My own children, my twin daughters, are 12 years old. Whatever we read in papers and prognoses about life on Earth in the year 2100, they will, God willing, probably be there. That is why what we do today and in this decade is so crucial, because it decides our kids' future, and nothing and no one relieves us from this responsibility. Of course, the financial industry plays a major role in this. We at DZ Bank, we take our responsibility very seriously. We're firmly anchored in the German cooperative financial sector, which means Sustainability is and has always been part of our DNA, and we walk the talk. We are one of the top players in the sustainable bond market in Germany. We're one of the largest providers of sustainable loans in Germany, and we are one of Germany's largest renewable energies lenders. A green transition, a sustainable transition, is non-optional for us. The required capital has to be intelligently managed. It has to flow into beneficial projects, and we need an ESG regulation that is smart, constructive, and harmonized. Global problems, global solutions, global standards. If we follow these guidelines, sustainability will become, in the medium to long term, the new normal in the capital markets. Ladies and gentlemen, your conference today has an impressive agenda with great speakers and great topics. Atlantik-Brücke and the Atlantic Council are two impressive organizations. Both are bridge builders and stand for the German-American as much as for the European-American friendship, which is crucial for the world we live in. Until recently, we took such stable bridges for granted, but we are being taught better these days. What we have learned from Gail Harvison is that institutions can become partners, but only people can become friends. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you inspiring conversations, a vital exchange of ideas, and many opportunities to bond and build bridges. Thank you very much, and Sigmar, Gabriel, the stage is yours.
Dear Mrs. Benkredda, thank you for your kind welcoming remarks and for hosting us so generously at this very special building in the heart of Berlin, right next to the US Embassy, by the way. We could not wish for a better location to hold the Transatlantic Conference. Dear Fred Kempe, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you and so many other distinguished guests from the United States back to Berlin. Following the inaugural Frankfurt Forum on US-European geoeconomics last year, I'm proud that we continue this successful collaboration between Atlantic Council and Atlantik-Brücke today and hopefully in many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to welcome all of you to the Transatlantic Forum on Geoeconomics. And it's clear that the interest in transatlantic cooperation in geoeconomics has only grown since we met in Frankfurt last year. Allow me to thank the dedicated team of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomics Center for the hard work to make this conference happen, and along with Julia Friedland and her team here in Berlin. Thank you very much. Making this event an annual conference, together with our partners at the Atlantic Council, is part of a broader strategy at Atlantik-Brücke. We aim to join forces with leading organizations across Europe and the Atlantic and offer a platform for the most pressing issues on the transatlantic agenda. I think we can all agree that the effect of geopolitics on economic growth is at the top of that agenda. The foundation of the transatlantic relationship is much cited shared values, among them freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. But on the shared commitment to those values, Europe and the United States have been building a robust security alliance and a vital economic cooperation. All too often, in my views, we separate these three spheres: values, security policy, and economic policy, and forget how deeply they are interconnected. There is a lot of talk about value-based foreign policy, but history teaches us that we can only hold up our values if we ensure the economic well-being of our societies and guarantee their security. Therefore, a successful transatlantic foreign and economic policy must be liberal in its ends, but realist in its means. As free and democratic countries, our goal must and will always be to strengthen democracy globally, foster individual liberty, and preserve peace. But to pursue those ends, our policies must be adapted to the realities we face. If we neglect our values, we will lose our compass. But if we neglect realism, we will be ineffective and lose our leverage. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why it's so important we have this conference today, where we will discuss transatlantic approaches to crucial issues at the nexus of economics and foreign policy. The realities we face are certainly challenging. The world has become multipolar, and as an American analyst said, we are living in a G0 world, a world without order, and this trend will only continue. Despite this, the Transatlantic Alliance responded with unity, decisiveness, and strength when Russia's war started against Ukraine, both in terms of military assistance and the tools of the so-called negative economic statecraft employed to punish Russia for breaking international law. But it would be naive to think that the efforts we have taken on Russia could be replicated, for example, our strategic competition with China. When Russia was a bit more, as Helmut Schmidt said, a military giant and an economic dwarf, and the Soviet Union and Russia have been something like a petrol station for Europe and some other parts of the world, China is an economic giant, and our economies are interlinked in many ways. So it will be much more difficult to deal with this challenge with China than it has been with the former Soviet Union or Russia. So I'm looking forward to the insights of distinguished speakers are willing to share with us today on the large toolbox of economic statecraft. Now more than ever, we need extensive exchange and cooperation between partners and allies to coordinate economic and foreign policy. Let's use the outstanding opportunity of this conference for a deep dive into these topics in order to learn how to build a more resilient transatlantic partnership in the third decade in this millennium. With this, I would like to close my remarks and would like to invite Fred Kempe. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
It's such an honor to be here, such a pleasure to be here, and I'll get to my thanks to Sigmar and Atlantik-Brücke in a minute. I want to thank Souâd and for the DZ Bank, the DZ Bank. What a beautiful place. And I understand you're a first-generation German. I'm a first-generation American. My parents were born, my mother in Pankow, Berlin, my father in the Ore Mountains of Saxony, the Erzgebirge. But Frank Gehry, and this is very little known, was born as Frank Goldberg, and his father was born in Brooklyn, New York, to Russian Jewish parents. His mother was a Polish Jewish immigrant born in Łódź. So this is a very small transatlantic world, and the immigrant experience of both of our countries enriches us so deeply. Sigmar, I thank you so much for your kind words, and yes, we hope it also goes on for many years to come. I also want to thank my longtime friend and person I've been stealing ideas from a long time, Norbert Röttgen. It's good to see you. And then obviously Josh running our Geoeconomic Center and Julia running the Atlantik-Brücke. It's just such a great partnership. Last night, I flew in from New York, where the Atlantic Council hosted our Global Citizens Award during the UN General Assembly. and I didn't know this before, but it was reported broadly in the German press, so I can now tell you it's also called the Weltbürger Prize. And among our distinguished honorees included Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, Ukrainian President Zelensky, US Treasury Secretary Yellen, all of whom were there, and Chancellor Scholz, German Chancellor Scholz. I'm pretty confident I got to Germany about the same time as he did in returning. And here we are, steps away from the Brandenburg Gate in this beautiful building. This really is transatlantic partnership in action. So the Chancellor said quite a bit of importance in the speech. I'm certainly not going to recall it all, but I think it's worth you taking a look at the Atlantic Council site and reading it. He did talk about the last year and how Germany made itself independent of Russian energy, which is a miracle in itself. And he said, Russia's war has utterly failed because of the courage of the Ukrainians and because of the unity of those supporting them on behalf of an international order of equals. He talked about how Ukraine inspires and how its suffering breaks our hearts. His words reminded me that this relationship, this transatlantic relationship, is sometimes inspirational and sometimes breaks our hearts. And it's built on two pillars. The first is security, and the second is economic. For many years, in fact, for many decades, we would largely separate those two pillars, thinking they didn't belong together. The security work anchored by NATO was developed on one track, and the economic relationship, full of bilateral trading arrangements between EU member states and the US, another track. Deterrence, military deterrence was one track, trade, economic relationship was another track. I think both of us in the US and Europe for a long time forgot an important lesson, and that was national security is economic security, and economic security is national security. That was the lesson our mothers and fathers, our grandmothers and grandfathers taught us. It was, in fact, the lesson of 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. Europe knew that lesson well. There's a reason the precursor to the European Union was the coal and steel community. And we knew the lesson well in the US. 60 years ago, the Atlantic Council was founded in part to foster a stronger and robust economic partnership between the world's leading economies in hopes of fostering peace. But over time, some of those lessons failed. Vladimir Putin helped us remember his brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine, and the heroic response of the Ukrainian people rallied citizens across Europe and the United States. And one way the West responded was trying to deliver an unprecedented financial blow to Putin and to Putin's economy. Together, we levied the tools of economic statecraft at a scale and speed that were previously unthinkable. We blocked assets, took banks offline, and sanctioned hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, $300 billion of Russian reserves are right now frozen, and we're discussing what should be the final use of them. We did it very quickly, and now, 18 months later, we are beginning to fully understand the impact as well as the limitations of these tools. All the while, we evaluate and consider next steps. The rest of the world is looking carefully to see precisely what we will do. Think of BRICS expansion or growing calls to diversify away from both dollars and euros. We can ignore those calls or we can respond to them. So today in front of you sits new research, that's what we do. It is the product of our Geoeconomic Center, which was created to bridge the worlds of finance and foreign policy. And it showcases new analysis from some of the best minds of the Atlantic Council and of the Atlantik-Brücke. What you will see in these pages is the beginnings of a framework to better understand the tools of statecraft and deepen the coordination between the United States and Europe. It's a new period. This requires new thinking. This requires new frameworks. Of course, the report features the coercive tools, like sanctions and export controls, but also the positive tools, including trade and development aid. Chancellor Scholz, speaking at Cipriani Wall Street on the margins of the UN General Assembly 2 nights ago, declared himself a determined free trader. His quote, being free traders puts us into a category of species that seems to be increasingly endangered, even in its natural habitat, the United States. He intentionally picked Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the director of the WTO, to be his introducer. The lesson of history is that when we work together, we're safer and we're stronger. The challenges are too great and the stakes are too high for us to forget that lesson again. Chancellor Scholz said the German-US relationship had never been stronger in his speech. It certainly has never been strong in this way. Looking out to a future after we sort of lost sight of each other for a while, and unified through the challenges from Putin's Russia and the challenges in Ukraine. So today, I hope you learn from our fantastic speakers, ask them difficult questions, put them on the spot. Don't be satisfied with weak rhetoric that doesn't get to the point. But most importantly, I hope you remember that we are living through an inflection point in history, and what this era ultimately looks like will depend on so much on how we shape it together. Germany understands inflection points, one happening after World War I, one happening after World War II, one happening after the Cold War, and I think we're now in a fourth inflection point, and this inflection point will be shaped, and we all in this room can help shape it. So thank you for welcoming me back to Berlin. I know from my own upbringing, my mother doesn't live any longer, but if ever there were a Berliner Schnauze, my mother and many of my relatives embodied that. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Kimberly Donovan, Director of the Economic Statecraft Initiative of the Atlantic Council. She'll introduce and moderate our first session, and I'm told this is the point I declare this set of meetings officially open.